Hello and welcome to Directors Dialogues from the Climate Governance Initiative, where we lift the lid on the different ways that company board directors are speaking up for climate in their boardrooms. In each episode, we meet a climate champion who's been leading or nudging or badgering their boardroom colleagues towards climate-friendly policies and practices. I'm Alexandra Bolton.
And I'm Matthew Moss.
And today we're delighted to have Changhua Wu with us. Changhua Wu is a member of the community of climate governance experts. She's a director in both private and not-for-profit organisations, an advisor, researcher and an analyst in the climate space.
Changhua Wu, we're delighted to talk to you. Welcome. Firstly, I really want to ask about you, about your journey, as they say, about your education, your first steps on the career ladder, and how you got to the position that you currently occupy, wearing many hats in many organisations.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Alexandra, for having me on this podcast. It's a great opportunity and honor to share my experience and with more colleagues. I'm still relatively new on this journey as a non-executive director, and but somehow, 1 year on, and I feel like somehow this is not only significant but also really meaningful journey for me to pursue as well. So as you introduced, my name is Changhua Wu, and I wear a few titles. And so I'm the chair of the Governing Council of Asia Pacific Water Forum, and I also the global senior fellow for the Institute of Public Environmental Policy, which is a nonprofit Chinese NGO, and which runs the only independent public environmental big data platform, which is pretty much driving, transparency, accountability agenda. Particularly now, we all know why it is important there. Besides that, I've also been serving as the China-Asia Affairs Director at the Office of Jeremy Rifkin, who is more my mentor, because he's the author of the Third Industrial Revolution, the entropy, now he's having another new book coming out in China in a month or so, which is called The Planet Aqua, which is on water. But anyway, I've been doing a lot of things, career-wise. I started so I was educated more like as a journalist. And so I started my career as the editor of the English edition China Environment News. And after graduating from Chinese Academy of Social Sciences there, interesting enough, that was literally, my page zero to get into environmental issues there. And so that was around 1992. And so when the global community actually was really busy preparing for the real Earth Summit there. So I was lucky enough as really totally young professional getting into this space. And of course, with the duty to write, to edit, and to communicate a lot of messages there, not only from China, but also from global perspective there. So that was sort of really the beginning of the journey, in the environmental landscape there. Then, of course, I got a chance to go to the U.S. and studied there at University of Maryland School of Public Affairs, majored in environmental policy and management. That pretty much started my shifting career focus actually about a policy analyst there. Then I joined the WRI, Water Resources Institute afterwards, and really started to work on of course, in the beginning of the China-specific program projects there, but later managed to help create the China Studies program and literally really focusing on China. So that was sort of an early career experience to become a really policy analyst, actually specialized on China's environment, climate change, energy policy, and sustainability issue, including actually environmental health issues there. So in a nutshell, that's sort of my early training and the learning. And of course, then you get into, different projects there. I think around, that was around 1997 during the Kyoto process. So my professional step into actually the climate change landscape, that was pretty much the turning point there. Because back then global community needed, everyone was making the efforts to deliver a Kyoto process, the Kyoto protocol. And China somehow was put in a very difficult position. It's the largest developing countries. And I remember back then, the Clinton administration, Gore, Vice President Gore back then actually really made a tremendous effort trying to get China on board or whatever. So luckily I was involved in that sort of a process, particularly started to focusing on the nexus of the energy policy, air pollution, climate change issues there. So in the end, I think I wouldn't say, China's really joining Kyoto Protocol was because of the project we did back then. But definitely, I think, the efforts we made, the joint research efforts, particularly from the US and China together for a couple of years, really made a significant impact. Putting on the table to the top leadership in China back then, basically a strong case saying actually, taking stronger efforts to fight climate change, benefiting China in terms of air, public health, and and of course we can pursue cleaner energy efficiency. So it's a winning strategy, and that was a simple but a very strong message there. So that was the beginning of the climate change there. Fast way forward. So my experience, as a policy analyst, you do not just focusing on the market-based instruments or one particular piece of the policy there. You started getting into, laws, like legislation, regulations, standards, then policy incentives there that you started to deep dive into further at the regional level. And because China is a large country, you have very well developed regions as well as less developed regions there. So at the regional diversity there, but also really looking into different industries. For instance, back then, later, of course, I joined the climate group and really, becoming the Greater China director for the climate group, setting up this sort of platform in China, totally focused on climate change. And that was a sort of the step after the World Resources Institute there. So in that context there, you started to learn, started even to look at technology. So now, of course, very recently, about a year and a half, a little bit more than a year ago, I officially became a non-executive director of the Tianqi Lithium, which is one of the largest, not only in China, but globally, lithium material, technology companies there. Although it's not simply just to say materials, but also it's already expanded to upstream. For instance, it has assets in Australia, it invested in Chile, but also downstream. It also invests in Smart 2, on the EV side as well. But the core expertise of the company is more like in the middle range, right? Processing, which is a chemical process, actually. The reason why the chairman of the company, the leadership of the company decided to reach out to me, to bring me on board, actually, to co-chair the ESG sustainability subcommittee of the board, of course, support the corporate sustainability agenda for a particular reason, because the leadership has the vision, level of ambition, and definitely would like to continue its leadership. So that's very important sort of foundation that for me, being part of the family and really start to contribute my expertise, through this very powerful vehicle as a executive board director to help facilitate and drive the sustainability agenda.
Yeah, thank you. I really want to dig into that point that you ended up on about the powerful position of the non-executive director. So, firstly, perhaps you could tell us something about the corporate board structure in China. What is the position of a non-executive director in the organizations that you've been involved with, and what sort of responsibilities do they have?
Sure. From the regulatory context there, so we have China. This is a heavily regulated sort of context there. By the way, it's not a not-for-profit, non-governmental whatever organizations there. So it's governed by the company law and the equity law. So those are the two fundamental pieces of legislation really governing the capital market actually in China, and in terms of behavior, listed companies' behavior there. So for a board, which is legally required, that's a basic structure actually for any public listed companies there. You have to have that actually. So usually, So you have shareholders. Shareholders are the owners of the company, right? So the board is legally designated actually on behalf of all the shareholders actually to govern, the company. And so, under in terms of number of people, Tianqi Lithium has 8 board members. I think different companies probably vary a little bit, not too many. It depends on whatever they need, I guess, actually. And the structure of the board. So for executive directors, they are, for instance, the owner of the companies. They are the largest shareholders of the companies, and they are the CEO, executive, and the CEOs of the companies. So they have their sort of, they own part of the companies, certain shares of the companies there, and if from the CEO's perspective, he's designated actually to run, right, the company on behalf of the senior management team, basically there. And for non-executive members there, with a very specific reason, because regulators realize for any companies, whatever the sectors there, because the laws regulations require many, many things, it's really difficult actually for all executive directors to fulfill that sort of duties. So non-executive directorship is designated to be more like a specialized expertise, right? To bring a small group of specialized expertise to join the board to support the company, to govern the company. Of course, if you look at the mandatory, for instance, auditing, accounting auditing, that's because that's crucial, that's key, right? And if you look at this capital market there, if you look at the nomination, remuneration, things like that. So there are few, and also investment. Strategic investment committee, subcommittee there as well. So then, of course, coming down to our sort of space there, so ESG sustainability, it's not specified in terms of each board actually needs to have a specialized person in ESG sustainability, and then you need to create a subcommittee for that particular purpose there. But it's sort of voluntary. But the regular context there is set already because it's a special expertise, right? So this is sort of non-executive directors, a group of people who somehow are specialized in their professional field. Their expertise actually are needed for a board, for a company actually to govern better, the company's business.
So we have, a large number of complex and interconnected systems happening here, where you're talking about energy, food, water, infrastructure, housing, we can go on. But both in the water context and also, as an independent director of Changhua Lithium, you will be needing to make decisions that balance lots of different things that are connected. So, a good example in mining is the environmental challenges that are associated with mining, and of course the growing demand for sustainable energy solutions. So, lithium for EV batteries, for example. Have you seen any good examples of how boards are managing to balance both these sort of two potentially conflicting issues, but also the wider systems effects that boards are having?
So Tianqi Lithium, is sitting in a very sort of interesting scenario. On one side, we're all pursuing accelerated clean energy transition, right? Batteries, EVs, whatever. So it provides products, solutions actually to fulfill that sort of accelerated transition there. But then there's the other side, meaning so we have to also make sure that's delivered in a sustainable manner. That's pretty much the core narrative within the boardroom there, right? And so then what do we do? So there are different tiers. At the bottom line, there are laws, regulations there, right? China has rather restrictive laws, regulations on the environmental side, on the ecosystem side, on the water side, whatever. Even we have specific, on the mining sector, specific laws, regulations there. So from the compliance perspective, there are very specific laws, regulation standards the company in that sector has to fulfill, has to comply. So that's the starting point. Then Tianqi Lithium, has been a leadership company. So the mindset of the company's top leadership board is say, okay, this is the business. It's not just a compliance issue. This is about a business there, right? And so I think that's very different sort of incentive for the boards actually to really look at the issues in a very different manner. So the narrative, the conversation in the boardroom is not just like, oh gosh, we have laws, regulations, we have to do this, we have to do that, but rather very really proactively, positively looking at the solutions there. That's why the company has taken many, many steps. For instance, on the mining side, we call it green mining. That's already a mainstream solution. The company has been doing that. There are certain sort of standards, voluntary, mandatory standards or frameworks already out there. They started to reach out to the sector globally, actually, to advance the agenda. As we are talking about it here, it's not like we all have laws, regulations covering everything or standards covering everything. It's not. In many, many cases, relatively new. So you have this sort of vacancies in terms of standards, frameworks, whatever, that sort of, really regulating, guiding the actions there. So the company would take really initiatives to not only itself, but to bring others together of their industry together. Even started to participating in developing standards within the ISO framework, right? So that's one thing. That if you look at the supply chain, okay, guys, supply chain is another thing. Procurement, particularly from procurement system, we need to really make sure within the company, we have really well developed system there to make sure we have very clear, defined criteria framework to manage that, and that's embedded in there as well. But in the meantime, another way actually of looking at, so within the company, one major thing actually I've been sort of advocating, which I also feel rewarded in a way that actions are taking. So today within the company, the sustainability issue, climate issue is not just to say, okay, this is one particular department, you are designated to lead that. It's not. It's pretty much embedded in everything. So the board member, non-executive board directors, actually, we've been already doing this twice already, started to reach out, ask the committee and the secretariat, the committee, supporting the board basically. So literally using designated time and opportunity to get the finance CFO on board with us. So we need to learn how the finance system works actually within the company, how the budget is made, right? How they really follow through everything. So it was on separate cases there. So we started to meet with, the O's actually of different departments so far actually. So CFO, the guy in charge of the supply chain, procurement, besides the sustainability, there's a department designated for that as well, and the sales. And safety. And now there's a relatively new sort of a segment being created within the company, not at the department level, but above that, but under the CEO. Is called oversight and auditing. So of course, auditing has always been an important part of the governance actually for any company. But rather than just different departments, including auditing, but now it's called oversight and auditing, and lifted up further above all the others. So creating mechanisms. So rather than relying on others, external sort of auditing to find the problems there, and then find the problems to tell you, so yeah, this is wrong, but rather the company itself started to build up this mechanism, governance mechanisms there, make sure, driving through the notes within the company to do so. So Tianqi Lithium today sets a really good example. At least actually their efforts have been recognized by the sector, by the industry in China, to a certain extent globally. So they've been in the global resources, sustainability, mining, whatever, because there are different platforms actually globally there as well. So they all be part of it there. So from that perspective, again, so the tone and it turns to be more positive rather than say, gosh, this is their liability, right? Non-compliance. We have to do this and that. By the way, actually, I not only chair the subcommittee of ESG sustainability, I also sit on the subcommittee of strategic investment there as well. Right. So for the company, just imagining, I'm not an investor or whatever stuff like that, but somehow, they somehow see my value. So this is more like about just, to make sure when they look into potential investment opportunities there, somehow sustainability has to be an important part of, this sort of strategy there as well. And from that perspective, I just share a little bit of sort of my learning on that curve. So for instance, for any merger, acquisition, investment decision, whatever, you had to do all the auditing, right? Legal, accounting, financial, whatever, stuff like that. How do you make sure this climate sustainability element is well integrated, embedded in that process is key. That's what I learned, basically. Rather than say, oh, after this investment decision is made already, let's take a look at think about carbon footprints, whatever. That's going to be too late, right? So that's a major step the company has also taken. It's a decision made by the board. So we move ahead to the early stage. I can give you this explanation. My argument is that because the company has committed to, for instance, of course, by 2050 carbon neutrality, so timelined carbon emission reduction targets there, right? It's not just about existing. You have to look into the future, right? That's about investment. So when you decide, what asset you're going to invest in, whatever, you have to take a look into this potential carbon footprint there as well. So the argument is not hard to make at all, right? It's more like, okay, how do you do it? It's not case by case, rather to embed that sort of thinking and action, into the system, into the process to the early stage as early as possible, right? For instance, there are cases of probably not adequate information available for data, whatever. Yeah, there are always challenges like that, but this awareness, right? This sort of awareness of the issues there needs to be there at the very beginning. That's another major step actually the board has taken as well.
Glorious. Thanks so much for that. I think our listeners can hear the unique position that you occupy in this space with wearing all of these hats. And I know we've mentioned that you're a member of the World Economic Forum's community of climate experts as well. So you bring a colossal breadth of experience to this conversation and the conversations you have in the boardroom. You've mentioned a little already about the unique position that China is in here. It's the world's highest carbon emitter, but also the world's largest investor in renewable energy. It is a colossal and diverse country, as you've said. There are very poor regions, there are very highly developed regions. The sectors that its companies are active in are very, very varied. So I wanted to ask you to reflect a little bit about how you see China's unique opportunities and responsibilities when it comes to climate change and carbon emission.
I could talk very big in a way, so I don't want to really spend time on that. We all know why China is important, as you mentioned already, as the world's current largest emitter, contributing to largely, actually, in large proportion to the new growth of emission every year. So, of course, sometimes we joke about it to say, okay, globally, if you want to address the climate change challenge, you first need to somehow decode China's fossil fuel, particularly the coal issues there, because without that, there's no way we're going to address that. It might not be fair to China, but as I said, jokingly, that seems to be the reality. To a large extent, basically, also it tells the importance actually of course, not only the country itself, it need to take actions to address those issues, but very, very importantly, other countries need to work with China there as well. Now, in terms of the solution, this is a really difficult story to tell. I think that to be fair to China, the country with all the data evidence there already, I don't have to repeat that. It's really fascinating to see how the country has managed to drive the clean energy transition so far. if you look at the progresses we made, particularly around renewable energy, energy efficiency, renewable energy, batteries, EVs, this is mobility, energy storage, grids. So there are many really shining spots, actually, highlights China has delivered so far. So why would China be able to do so? I think compared to even the US, many parts of European countries there. So the political system is, comparatively speaking, is a little bit simpler in a way in terms of decision making, right? And so if the top leadership in this country decides that this is the thing, then that's pretty much the signpost actually guiding the shift. That has been the case. So China, the Chinese leadership has embraced something really bigger called ecological civilization, right? And it's big. Civilization is really a big term. Ecological, we're all part of nature, right? And so that's really big sort of agenda, vision, mission there already. But the more important thing is that you cannot just say, that, yeah, that's all, ecological civilization. So what do you mean? How do you deliver that? I think that's a major milestone the country has made so far. So there were three things actually to say what is it in it actually of the ecological civilization. Specifically, China wants to deliver three things. First is ecological red lines. Globally, we call it planetary boundaries there, right? So the whole country, particularly the land space, actually been really examined to the nitty-gritty details. Look at the functions, the biodiversity, the health, whatever stuff like that. So that's one thing. The second one is really about pricing nature, right? So we take resources from nature. It's not free, right? For a long time, we've been doing that. So it's free. Well, we cut down trees, whatever, we just pollute. No, you cannot do that anymore. So pricing, from the policy perspective, that has become a really powerful tool. That relates to companies, meaning companies, you operate, meaning you have to pay for, there's no free riding anymore, right? And so that's the second one. The third one is about really equity issue. We call it ecological compensation. This is particular to address upstream, downstream differences there. As I said, the coastal areas in China, they sit at the very downstream of the major watersheds, rivershed, very well developed already, right? But then going upward, actually, if you look at, the central western part of the country, in many cases, they're really lagging behind. And now with, the rich, the wealth in their hands already, developer regions say, okay, laws, regulations, said the environmental protection quality. I do not like pollution anymore. Do not do chemical industry, whatever polluting industries upstream. Upstream decision makers say, wait a second, what do I do? How do I survive? What's my livelihood there, right? So this sort of compensation mechanism. Those are the three things, actually, three major pillars that have been deployed. Continue to improve actually in this part of the world already. That's really important foundational piece of sort of China's decision to transform its economy. So of course, on one side, of course, we need to address the coal issue and the fossil fuel issues there. China has been doing so, but the level of sophistication continues to impress progress, like Rachel mentioned before about nature, right? We have to take into the issue in a very more sophisticated manner, right? And that requires policymakers make really the right decisions or effective decisions, actually, to incentivize, the transition, towards we call it a positive tipping points. Actually, at this moment, it's not an easy task at all. Now, the complicated issue, particularly coming down to emissions part, is the supply chain. Supply chain, as we all recognize, and particularly talk about within the WEF community, we call it Scope 3, right? The thing is, China occupies a large part of the industrial value chain. If you look at the UN UNIDO, Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, I think that they have this list, look at the different industries. They categorize altogether 666 industries globally. China is the only country that has all of them. So China is put in a position to really somehow, like it or not, to lead the supply chain transformation. And now globally, of course, we're all looking into, to particular scope 3, because that occupies big chunk of the emissions there.
I completely agree. I think it was Antonio Guterres who stole a film title and said we need to do everything everywhere all at once. It is about that completely holistic thing.
Yeah, and it's almost impossible. So that's the conclusion.
Nothing's ever perfect, but we can do what we can do. So what advice would you give to peers, people who are earlier on their journey than you in this space? What advice would you give to peers that are trying to deliver climate action on the boardroom? What's sort of that one thing you'd like to pass on from all your experience and knowledge?
I don't think I have a one simple solution, suggestion, whatever, stuff like that. As I said, in my particular case, the reason I was given this opportunity because of the leadership of the company already, right? When you have that sort of foundation, the DNA, the culture in it, that's the beginning. That's a good beginning point, actually. So when I was given this chance, I decided to embrace it, right? So that's sort of the journey I'm on now, basically. So I went through the process and really lucky enough, because of the good foundation, the DNA, the culture, the leadership awareness, the desire, the aspiration of the leadership of the company. So I do not have much problem in terms of really speak very openly within the board. By the way, actually, so out of the 8, board members, so 4 are women. So now, actually, just a couple of months ago, the chairman is now the daughter. She was born in the 1980s. This is the younger generation, educated overseas, whatever. So the chair of the board now is a woman. Then we have 3 other non-executive directors are women there as well. So this is really sort of the created this culture within this is just 8 people, right? This culture element.
That's wonderful to hear. Absolutely. The learning and the cultural sensitivity have come across as really important. Thank you. Sadly, we're at time. Thank you so much, Changhua Wu, for your time and for sharing so much of your expertise with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
It really has. Thanks so much, Changhua Wu.
My pleasure. Thank you.
The Climate Governance Initiative is a global non-profit network reaching more than 100,000 board directors. Most of the world's greenhouse gas emissions come from the private sector. So the central question the initiative asks is, what if every company had a climate target and a plan to meet it? We work globally with over 30 chapters reaching board directors in over 70 countries, and our work draws on the principles for effective climate governance set out by the World Economic Forum. If you want to know more, there's a link in the show notes where all our content is available for free and where you can find your local chapter.
This podcast was recorded in July 2024.
In our next episode, we'll be talking to Tina Mavraki. Tina is a brilliantly experienced board director and strategic advisor with a colossal executive career in the finance sector and in the real economy, working in energy and metals and minerals, and has been driving climate governance in all of her organisations. We're really looking forward to talking to Tina.